Please welcome to the stage the president and managing broker of Goldmark Commercial Real Estate, Andy Westby.
Welcome to Commercial Connect 2024. It's awesome to see so many of you here today. We're thrilled that you could join us. And I'm going to start today with a moment of gratitude. Gratitude for all of you for taking time out of your busy days and schedules to spend an hour or two or maybe three backstage with us today. Gratitude to our team. These guys have worked for hours upon hours upon hours to polish and prepare their presentations today. So a huge thank you to you guys. Thank you. And last of all, I want to thank God because I get to live and I get to do business in the greatest place on earth, the Southern Red River Valley. And so I feel extremely blessed to be a part of this business community, and I'm really thrilled to see all of you here today. So let me give you a quick background for those of you who may not know me. I spent about 16 years in software and tech before I joined commercial real estate. I was a bit of a corporate and tech burnout and jumped headfirst into commercial real estate back in late 2015. I'm a leap year baby, and so I actually turned 11 years old last week. So if I'm drinking apple juice backstage afterwards, you'll know why. And then I know you Minnesota fans like to claim that you're the longest suffering fan base. Try being a Detroit Lions fan or a Cleveland Indians fan all your life, and then talk to me about suffering. So I'm going to give a quick show of hands. Who was at our first event last year, Commercial Connect 2023? Okay, decent amount of hands. Thank you and welcome back. I'm glad that we didn't scare you away and that you chose to come back again. But a lot of newcomers, first-timers. We got a little bigger room this year, a little more elbow room and a few more attendees. So I want to give people a little bit more background about why we're here, okay? And so at its core, Commercial Connect is about unlocking insights and connecting to opportunities, right? And we're going to do that through insights of numerous sources of data, local, regional, national, right? And we believe a lot of this information will help you see opportunities, probably a few challenges as well, right, in the months and years to come. Now, our goal is for all of you to leave here more informed, to make better business decisions for what you do every day, to see this region continue to thrive. So a few quick notes. This event was inspired by Bender Commercial in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And I think somewhere in this room, there's two gentlemen from Bender. If you guys would raise your hands, Reggie, Rob, where are you guys in the audience right here? Okay, these guys are the best in the business when it comes to commercial real estate in Sioux Falls. They've been putting on their event for over 25 years. We got a chance to see it. We thought this community needs something like that. And so for anybody who's doing business in Sioux Falls or thinking about doing a business in Sioux Falls, make sure you get a business card from those guys before you leave today. Okay, another quick note. A lot of these slides will have a lot of information. Stats and metrics and data that you might want to quick jot a note of. Maybe some of you will take a picture of it, that's fine. I'm going to save you the effort. We're going to email everybody a copy of today's presentation. So you'll get that post-event sometime tomorrow. And lastly, on everybody's table is a QR code or a table tent with a QR code. So as we go through today's event, if you've got a question, if you want to go deeper, if something didn't quite make sense, I want you to scan that QR code on your table tent and submit your questions. And at the end of the event, we'll take as many questions as time allows and give you a chance to interact with our panel through your questions. And lastly, we have a lawyer on our team, and so we have to have a disclaimer, and that is we've done our best to gather as much information from verified and trusted sources, but I'm not going to make 100% guarantees on every single piece of information, but we've certainly done our best here today. So enough of the preview. I'd like to get into the main attraction. And I'm going to start with a quick story about Einstein. So Einstein died in his very first day in heaven. The very first person he meets has an IQ of 180. And Einstein says, fantastic. We can talk about quantum physics and math. The second person he meets has an IQ of 140. And he says, great. We can talk about politics and we can talk about art. The third person he meets has an IQ of 80. So Einstein asked him, what's going to happen with interest rates? Now, all joking aside, I say that because I'm not Einstein, I'm not an economist, neither is our team, but we have done our best to gather as much information as we can to give you insight into what's happening nationally, regionally, and locally, right? And we take that job of gathering information very seriously at Goldmark Commercial. Why do we take that so serious? Well, someone who actually lived back in Einstein's time said, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And someone once told me that opinions are kind of like mixed tapes. You like to listen to yours, but not anybody else's. Millennials, I'll tell you what a mixtape is back at Social Hour, okay? Another saying that we've heard before is oil, or data is the new oil, right? Our economy's been built on oil for centuries. Data is replacing that, right? It's a huge business asset now. Without data, we have no idea where we were, where we are, or where we might be going. And so we gather a lot of information, and you're going to see a lot of that today. But I want to make a special point. We are not here today to talk about specific Goldmark Commercial transactions or deals or data, okay? This is the entire market that we're trying to give you a picture of. And so if I or anyone on our team uses the word we, we're not talking about Goldmark Commercial. We are talking about the entire market. So I just want to make sure that that's really clear. Okay, enough of the setup. We're going to talk about the national economic landscape in a segment that I affectionately call the national economy, starring in the good, the bad, and the ugly. That played a lot better at rehearsal. All right, so we'll start with the good. There's some things that are good, right? So we'll start with the positive. Number one, we avoided recession. We didn't hit one last year. I stood on this stage a year ago. Most economists at that point predicted we would find ourselves in a recession this year. We didn't in 23. So this chart doesn't have anything for 23. Positive news. As we look at inflation and what's happening there, we're cooling. We're getting better. We're not to the Fed's target rate of 2% yet. Last measure was about 3.1%. We're getting there though, right? We're on the right path. Which means the Fed has started to talk about loosening up their policy. We're hearing about drops in the interest rate by the second half of the year. Anywhere from 0.5 point to 1.5 points has kind of been the consensus of how much they expect the rate to drop here this year. We currently sit at a federal funds effective rate of about 5.33, so we do expect that to come down. That's good. The economy is still growing, so we're seeing good growth. I think GDP at the end of 23 was about 3.3. From the things we read, that's actually faster than every other developed country in the nation, or in the world, excuse me. So positive news there. And a huge cash pile. Andrew's going to talk more about this when we get into the investment section, but there's a lot of cash on the sidelines waiting to be deployed into many different things, including commercial real estate. And then lastly, the unemployment rate is pretty healthy. Now you can poke holes, people can talk about how many people are looking for work versus not and what's happened post-COVID, but in general that number is relatively healthy at 3.7% right now. So those are some of the good that we wanted to highlight. Let's unfortunately move into the bad. So sorry about that. All right, let's talk about a few things on the bad side. Number one, because of some of the things we just talked about, the federal funds rate hit a high of 5.5% last year, 23-year high. Mortgage rates followed, 7.8%, 23-year high. Made things very expensive for everybody in this room and around the country. That led to what we now have seen is the widest gap ever between the average home mortgage payment, which is the top line of this chart, and the average rent, which is the bottom line in this chart, about $1,300. So in summary, it's never been more expensive in this country to buy a house than it is to rent. Okay, let's talk about jobs. I talked about unemployment being relatively healthy, okay, but job growth has been slowing. We lost a ton in COVID, it bounced back, it's now slowing, down 44% year over year. I think personally one of the more alarming stats as you read the job report, 1 in 4 jobs last year was added by the US government. It averaged 56,000 jobs per month versus 23,000 per month the year prior, up 143%. That's a little bit alarming. Okay, it's an election year. If you haven't been watching the TV or paying attention online, that means there's some impacts coming here as well, right? A lot of people, the watchful waiting, sailors in the storm, whatever you want to call it, they're battening down, waiting to see which way the winds go to set their sails. And we expect that that will have somewhat of a dampening effect on decisions among businesses and even individuals. And one final stat in this category, more specific to commercial real estate, would be the AIA Billing Index, okay? What this index does is it measures billing increases within architect firms across the US and billing decreases. A number below 50 is bad, billings are decreasing. A number above 50 is good. We sit at 45 across the US. That's a leading indicator of construction slowdown in that segment, right? One bright spot, look at the Midwest. We're the only one above 50. Not by much, but we are above 50. It's time for the ugly. You didn't think we'd skip that category. So let's talk about a few things that are a little bit worse yet. Number one, what we call the quadruple whammy of rising interest rates, insurance, taxes, and construction costs. This had a huge impact on the residential side of our economy. So what are some of the stats there? Well, housing stock across the US is at about historic lows right now. Median home prices hit a historic high, just short of $390,000. And according to National Association of Realtors, 28-year low for home sales last year. So kind of a tough market to be in with all things on the rise there. A lot of people talk about inflation and interest rates, but we haven't seen as much in the media about insurance, so we want to go a little bit deeper on what has been leading to these big insurance premium increases. Well, number one, in 2023, there was 28 losses of $1 billion or more in the US insurance industry. Total losses, about $93 billion. Okay, that has an impact on everybody, and in commercial real estate property insurance premiums, we're seeing an average of about 20%. Some cases more, some a little less. But anyone in this room that owns commercial real estate, if you haven't gotten your renewals, expect to see some increases, and in certain cases, big increases. The older the properties, the more burden you're going to carry. And then the office, what we call the office credit crisis, right? So as interest rates rose, no market was impacted more than the office market, where vacancies just rose as well. And when incomes drop, vacancies rise, interest rates rise, values plummet. And if you think about major metro cities with millions of square feet in one building sitting vacant, that's a big risk for a lot of banks holding that note. I'm going to give you one example. Okay, this building behind you is the AT&T office park, or office tower in downtown St. Louis. It's the largest office building in the state of Missouri at 1.46 million square feet. In 2006, it sold for $205 million, about $140 a foot. Fast forward, AT&T vacates that tower. The owners sell it for $4.1 million, $2.80 a foot. Okay, that owner holds it for a year, backs out of their plan to do a complete gut and remodel of it, and brings it back to market on auction with a starting bid of $2.5 million, $1.71 a foot, and receives one bid. Okay? A super extreme case, I realize. Not every single building in every market looks like that, but it is a microcosm of what's happening in these major metros with large vacant office buildings. Thankfully, we don't have that problem here. I'll just ease your concerns a little bit. This is national, right? We're still at the national level. And then my last bit of ugly to share. I'm not calling Jerome Powell ugly, okay? I know this isn't the most flattering picture of him. It's not him that's ugly, it's what he said recently, that the US is on an unsustainable fiscal path in an interview on CBS 60 Minutes last month. Why does he think that? Well, the reasons he shared: debt is growing faster than GDP, not a good sign. We're at $34 trillion in national debt currently, which, if you run the math, is $100,000 for every man, woman, and child in this country, right? And clearly, our current administration doesn't really care about that. I'd say even the potential incoming administration doesn't seem to care a lot about national debt. So we keep kicking that can at least another probably 4 years down the road. We find that a bit ugly. Okay, enough national. We want to spend a lot of time getting more local now. So we're going to get into What do we see locally that's happening, good, bad, and ugly? And so I'll go through these. Number one, North Dakota, named the best state to start a business by Forbes 2 years in a row. It's a great stat. Nothing against Minnesota, but North Dakota ranked at the top of their list. Total sales, all asset categories for commercial real estate in 23 were up 12.5%. And you'll get details on each category in a bit, but that's an alarming stat for a lot of markets where they saw declining sales. We bucked that trend. Leasing activity, up year over year across all asset classes, office, retail, industrial. On-market leasing was up almost 19%, led by industrial and retail. Office didn't have a good year. Paul will talk more about that when he comes up. But retail and industrial were very strong. Okay, average home price is up 2%. It's a positive sign. Hotel stays, this stat just came out last week. The CBB released that hotel stays up 15% to 150 million last year. So people continue to come. We attract people from around the region to this market. And then population growth, finally. Our cities continue to grow. So if you look at Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo, our annual growth sits between about a 1.5% to 3%. And we put Horace here because over the last 5 years, they've grown almost 15%. Much smaller base to grow from, but they're seeing phenomenal growth there as well. So we talk about the good, we have to talk about the bad. There's a few things here. Home sales, like nationally, were down locally, about 19%, according to the local real estate office. Permits, this would be all permits, residential, commercial, new, remodel, down about 9% year over year, and that mirrors national trends. New home starts and multifamily units were down, as far as permits go, 12%. Unemployment is second lowest in the nation, according to a recent report, at 1.7. We like to be at the top of lists in Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo. We're at a lot of the tops. This is not a list that we should be particularly proud of, right? As unemployment drops that low, it becomes harder to get employees. We got to pay more. It's inflationary to your bottom lines. And so while we have a lot of businesses that are able to hire and retain, it is a challenge for some, certainly. And then finally, a point I want to go into a bit more detail on is that Fargo's current population density, specifically Fargo in this case, can't support its future growth. And I'm going to show you more what I mean about that. So go back maybe a month or two. The Forum ran a story on the growth from 2002 to 2022. And they illustrated it with that blue box, which was about 7,500 acres that we grew the city in 20 years. So I'm going to redraw, or actually one more stat that they figured was that our population density in Fargo specifically is about 4.9 people per acre. Okay, so just for reference, like a major metro like Chicago, about 18.7 per acre. We sit at about 4.9, okay? So let's redraw that box in the context of the diversion. The diversion channel is on the left side of that image, the thicker yellow line. The southern embankment, which is what will hold the floodwaters back, is that thinner yellow line at the bottom. So there's the blue box, 20 years worth of growth. What do we have left is the yellow box following the Fargo ET area. We measured that as about 18 square miles, 12,000 acres, plus or minus. So now run the math. 4.9 people per acre. About 12,000 acres means we can fit about 60,000 people in that box in the future. Now look at MetroCog. Their results a couple years ago said, hey, 100,000 more people are coming to this metro by 2050. And I will say, certainly some of those 100,000 are going to go to Horace, West Fargo, Moorhead, Dilworth, but a lot of them are going to look to Fargo too. And if we continue at that current density rate, it's not going to work, at least not for long. So we've got some work to do there. All right, enough of the bad, now the ugly. As a team, we spent a lot of time on this topic. What are some of the ugliest things that we should point out about our local region? And it didn't take too long, I guess, after discussing that there's one thing that really stuck out at us. Our Bison lost this year to UND, to USD, and worst of all, to SDSU in the same season. This is easily the ugliest thing that our Metro had to face. My prediction, it's not on the slide, I predict this will never happen again. At least I hope this will never happen again. That's for our South Dakota friends here in the audience today. All right, a few quick local trends now, and I'm going to wrap up and hand it over to the team. So I'll go through these pretty quick. We've got A really good position from a median home value perspective regionally. Now we're looking just at local competing cities of similar size and or type of city. So West Fargo at the top, Fargo, Moorhead near the middle. We look at cost of living index. So what would a $100,000 salary look like in those cities compared to here? And so all but Rochester, Minnesota are more expensive to live in, right? Rochester's the only one where you would make less here than $100,000 in Rochester. So a really good sign for what our cost of living here is in this region. And then finally, permit trends. What type of investment levels being driven into these cities? So we looked at permit values across these major metros, divided it by their populations. Fargo comes out on top. So 786 million by our population is about almost 5,900 per person. Moorhead, West Fargo fall right about in the middle. Interestingly enough, if you can see it, maybe in the back it's a little hard, the only city to see an increase year over year was Moorhead. Every other city had a drop in permits. Moorhead was up. About $65 million in government and county projects helped bolster Moorhead's number last year. So really quick scorecard. The team is going to go a lot deeper on each one of these topics. So metro permits, $1 billion, down 9%. That's all permits. If we dive into commercial specifically, down 15%. That would be just new construction, about $240 million. Positive signs, lease volume up over 1 million square feet, as I mentioned, up 19%. That's all categories, office, retail, industrial. And then sales volume. We found about $550 million in all asset classes sold last year, up 12%. Almost every market in this country was down last year. So it's a very positive sign as well. So if I was to summarize everything I just said into one statement, it would be this: that the good here far outweighs the bad. There's not a community in our country that doesn't have some spots that are a little bit rougher. I think if you look at the positives that we have going for us here and you look at the negatives, the scale is very lopsided. We have so many good things going our way. Companies continue to invest here. They continue to grow here. And as proof positive of that, I'm going to put up 15 different logos of companies who started a new business here or relocated their business to this region in the last year. And I'm positive we did not get them all. I'm sure there were others as well. We wouldn't have anything on this slide if this was not a fantastic place to build a business, to raise a family with a low cost of living and have a wonderful supporting community behind it. And so just a quick welcome to these companies and the others who joined us last year. So let's wrap it up with a few predictions. If you weren't here last year, how this works, we give you a bunch of information and then we make some predictions about how the next year is going to go. And I want to recap last year. We're going to own up to how we did. And so last year at this event, we made 32 predictions. Someone got the Karnak thing back there, I heard. We got about 23 and a half right. One was kind of a push, so I split that one down the middle. I don't know, we're pretty proud of that overall. I think we could do even better, but that's not a bad batting average. And I'm not going to spend time going through each one. This is going to scroll them all. I'm just going to say this. We do our best to analyze trends and data and information to make as accurate of predictions as we can. We're not perfect, right? I'm sure if we had ChatGPT try to do this, maybe they'd beat us, maybe they'd fail. I don't know. But we do our best to try to give you guys as much information and direction as we can. So let's get into 2024 predictions and move into the land update next. So a couple quick things. I do believe, like most, that the Fed funds rate will come down. I'm going to say 75 basis points by the end of the year. I think permit values, I'm talking new commercial real estate permits, will be up in West Fargo after a rather down year for permits for them. I think Fargo and Moorhead pull back a little bit on permits. Not significantly, but a little bit. And then for total sales activity, we were up this year. Nobody else was up. Leasing activity, we were up. I do think we maybe peaked a little bit. I think we pull back, and I'm going to call this more potholes than pitfalls, right? We're not going over a cliff, but I think we have a little bit of a pullback in total sales and leasing activity next year. And finally, we have a wild card. We like to give you one kind of out of left field thing. I'm a Lions fan. You heard me up front. This is the year we take the NFL by storm. Watch your kneecaps because we are going to win the Super Bowl next year. All right. So with that, we're going to move into our next slot on the agenda, which is our land update. Nate Vaughn was going to talk about raw land and improved land. And I'll tell you what, folks, there's nobody better in our market to talk about land. He's an agent with Goldmark Commercial Real Estate. He's the president of Goldmark Design and Development. And while the guy might be the shortest one on our team, his list of accomplishments is super long, so don't hold it against him. He's been a licensed architect since 2009 in over 10 states. He's worked on 40 land development deals across 5 states. He's contributed to the design of 290 projects. Please help me welcome to the stage Nate Vollmuth.
Thanks, buddy. Thank you, Andy. If you guys in the back want, there's a couple seats up front here if you want to come up. I'm just going to tell a couple jokes and waste some time here. So thanks, Andy. My name's Nate Vollmuth. Sorry, let's get the next slide here. Nate Vollmuth. I've been with Goldmark Commercial for the past 4 years. Before my time with Goldmark Commercial, I worked with a large land development company here in Fargo after moving back from Sioux Falls in 2013. As well, I run Goldmark Design and Development, which is a local architectural and land development company. Today, I'm going to give you a land update, talk about the sales and the driving forces behind those sales, and we'll dive deeper into raw land and improved land, comparing the numbers to the last 4 years. So before I start, I'm going to give you a quick life lesson. I'm going off script here. I'm not telling a political joke, but I gave this presentation. My wife thought it'd be a good idea to present this for my twin 5th graders. It was a terrible idea. It was the most humbling experience I've ever done in my life. My son told me to pick up the pace, and my daughter gave me the snore face. So if you ever want to be humbled, ask your kids or your family to critique you before you go on stage the next day. So, all right, so let's jump into some national land trends. First off, interest rates have fallen, as Andy spoke to earlier. We hope and believe rates will slowly fall this year. As interest lowers, we believe anticipated increased activity in land sales. Construction activity has declined significantly. Loan growth in Q4 of 2022, 19.5%. That same time frame in 2023, 4.2%. Very significant drop. This would signal contractors are getting hungry for work, which should make projects more feasible and potentially lead to an uptick in land sales this coming year. And lastly, industrial projects. Been red hot the last 2 to 3 years. Sales and leasing has been up. Last year, industrial starts declined by 47%. We believe this will lead to less industrial land purchases, which will increase availability in industrial land in the coming years and probably depress pricing. That's at a national level. At a local level, we think that is probably not the case, and Brett will talk to that a little bit further down the road here. So, local impacts, things that we see out our front door. Infrastructure and specials, the cost of putting in services. In the past, we've said that when clients ask us, we feel that specials will be in the $2 to $2.50 per square foot range. This year, that jumped up to $2.75 to $3 per square foot. And the reason why is there's a lot of private construction has dropped significantly, as Andy spoke to, but public projects are still very prevalent, and so we don't see that the specials will soften in the coming years. FM diversion. As of this month, it is 35% complete with major construction activities. Completion is slated for 2027. Once completed and certified, it will open up significant available land for development in South Fargo. And lastly, some notable projects and some needs. Sanford Sports Complex. First phase of it will be completed sometime in April of this year. Second phase completed in 2025. Once that facility opens and it it drives activity and traffic in that sector of town, prices will increase. Needs. We have 2 interchange projects needed. One is actually right by the Sanford Sports Complex off of I-29. There's another interchange project west of the fairgrounds in West Fargo. Without those completed, land sales will be slower in those areas and stifle land values and future development. And as Andy spoke to previously, we're going to run out of room. With the diversion, we now have a boundary, we have a border around our city, and so we need to find ways to get denser, and infill projects will become more prevalent. Sorry, hit the wrong button. And finally, affordable housing. Many projects are under construction currently. I believe the forum wrote that there's going to be 200 units put online this year. You'll see in my development slides a little bit later in the presentation that 3 of the 4 multifamily land sales were for affordable housing projects. However, with limited supply, multifamily land in the metro, prices are on the rise for that sector. So, some driving forces behind land prices. Location, location, location. I said it last year. Access, visibility, traffic counts, all the major factors for driving up land prices. Development density. It's something that City of Fargo is talking about now. Andy alluded to it. They're going to push for higher dense developments, which will lead to higher land prices as well. Parcel sizes, larger parcels typically sell for less per square foot than smaller. Easements, encumbrances, the things you don't see, usually drives, the more there are in a site, usually drives down pricing. And then your neighbor or the tenant mix. If you have a strong national tenant next to a piece of land that you own, usually the price per square foot goes up. So jumping into some data, 2023 raw land sales versus the last 5 years. On the left are sales between 2019 and 2022, mostly concentrated in the Northwest, which is primarily industrial land, and Southwest, primarily retail, office, multifamily. On the right are land sales raw land sales just in 2023. Raw land sales were up compared to 2022, but down compared to the 5-year historical averages. You'll see the locations are very similar to the previous years. And deeper look into some of the 23 numbers of raw land sales, roughly 821 acres were sold in the FM Metro with an average price last year of $44,000 per acre. Year previous was $33,000 per acre, which is a good jump. Historically, 2019 and 2021 were our highest on record for acres sold, driven by high demand and low interest rates. For a second year in a row, Horace ranked number 1 in average price per acre, trailed by Fargo and West Fargo. This is the same ranking we had last year. One caveat for that stat, many of the raw land sales in Horace had single-family homes attached to them, which drove up that average price per square foot. However, as Andy stated, Horace is growing dramatically, and therefore developers are recognizing that and buying up land as the demand is strong. So let's look at a summary of raw land sales by area of the metro before we look at some of the specific examples. This image shows all raw land sales in 2023. Total transactions and pricing up from 2022. In the North Metro, 275 acres, 5 transactions, just over $27,000 per acre. South Metro, 546, 10 transactions, $52,000 per acre. As we spoke to earlier, location and land use, traffic counts, all driving factors of the higher price for raw land in the South Metro. Here's one example of a south side raw land sale. This parcel is located directly west of Southdale Farms, which is a single-family commercial development in Horace. Just off this image to the southeast is the new Horace High School and Middle School. 47-acre parcel, $116,000 per acre. One note here, 5 of the 15 raw land sales were in Horace last year. So the developers have recognized that demand and are taking action. Now on to improved land sales. Land that has gone through the entitlement process, has been zoned, has been platted, and infrastructure has been installed. Development land came off its peak in 2021, but still posted a very solid year in 2022 and 2023 in both volume and value. Diving into 23 a bit more, retail land sales drove an average price of $14.12 per square foot. In 2022, it was roughly $3.50 higher than that at $17.62. One interesting trend we've seen is that industrial land in the core of Fargo and West Fargo, there's been a few transactions where the price was actually over $10 per square foot for industrial land, which exceeds the average price of office land. It shows that location is key for all land uses. And the third section is our leaderboard. The City of Fargo led the way in office and multifamily. West Fargo led the way in industrial, and Horace led in retail. So let's quickly look at two noteworthy land sales, improved land sales. This is Holiday bought this lot on South 52nd Avenue and Veterans Boulevard, just over $16 per square foot. This is a development that was launched in 2021, and only one of the 5 lots is unsold. It's a great example of a development that was bought roughly raw and is almost sold out in 3 years. It shows that the activity, sites where activity is strong, location is great, and projected high traffic volumes are there, has tremendous value and activity. Second example of an improved land sale was in Moorhead. This is a pad site in front of the Moorhead Azul Shopping Center. This is south of I-94 on County Road 75. This parcel was sold for $15.85 per square foot, which is a very strong retail price for Moorhead. And now on to my 2024 land predictions. I believe industrial land sales will be down. Demand is strong, but the metro is lacking supply. This will lead to higher prices per square foot in industrial land this coming year. Retail land sales will be up. Construction costs have stabilized, demand is steady, and I project a rebound to sales that were down roughly 50% last year. I feel office land will unfortunately be down again in 2024. And mixed use and multifamily will continue to climb. The need is great. The variable here is if we'll have enough supply to meet that demand. And lastly, my prediction, my wild card. Last year I did an NFL thing. It wasn't as terrible as a prediction as Andy's was. And I said the Minnesota Vikings were not going to win the Super Bowl. This year I'm predicting the Taylor Swift era is coming to an end, and she won't be the most important thing we talk about in NFL broadcasts. I was hoping a bigger laugh than that, to tell you the truth. All right, that's it for me. I appreciate your time. That concludes our land update, and now we'll move on to the office update. I would like to introduce to the stage our next speaker, Mr. Paul Campbell. He's a commercial agent here at Goldmark Commercial. He is also a licensed real estate attorney. Paul specializes in the office market. And finally, while Paul is a millennium, he still prefers working in the office. Welcome to the stage, Paul.
Thank you, Nate. Well, you were promised the bad and the ugly. Here I am. I get to be the face of the office market today, which is no easy task. Uncertainty last year of whether we'd see doom and gloom. Did it come? Well, it did. Here's some of the headlines we saw. My personal favorite, the office market had it hard in 2023. Next year it looks worse. So first, on the national level, it's not pretty on the leasing or sales side in 2023. We had less people leasing office, less people buying office. We saw the highest vacancy in history at about anywhere between 18 and 20% across the country. Comparing that to pre-pandemic in 2019, we were at about 11%, so almost doubled over that period. The sales side wasn't much better. We saw a 56% reduction in sales nationwide. And if you came last year, we learned that vacancy doesn't tell the whole story. There's also lease space that people don't use and lease space that people don't want. So starting with the don't use, Castle Security Systems, they track key fob entries into large metro offices across the country. If you remember last year we had this slide, that was the dramatic free fall, March of 2020 for COVID, went from 100% all the way down. The good news is we've been steadily rising ever since. This is from March 2020 to today. We've been gradually going up for people going back into the office. And the silver lining is for the first time since they've been tracking in 2020, we hit 53% on average at the end of last year. Then there's space that people don't want, and they're actively trying to get rid of, and that's what we call subleasing. Space listed for sublease also spiked in 2020, as you can see, and has been steadily climbing ever since. Hit a record high in 2023. So last year we discussed how change is coming. This year we saw that change continuing. The trends, people wanted less space, they wanted more amenities, nicer spaces. They preferred suburban areas as opposed to large metro areas, downtown areas. And again, we saw more of that hybrid model nationally and some locally as well. Part-time in the office, part-time at home. So depending on your perspective, our local office market could be considered good if you compare it to national markets or some comparable markets, but it's bad compared to our local historical market. So here's our current office metro universe. Every red dot represents an office building in the metro. We have almost 13 million square feet of office space. We saw the slowest growth rate since 2011 last year, just an abysmal 1.1%. That was the lowest since 2011. And comparing that to the last 5 years as a whole, we saw almost 14%. So slow growth. Less people were building offices as well. This is permits. Permits in Fargo and West Fargo were down. Moorhead was up. That was the one exception. A little bit of a caveat. The 630% increase represents 2 office buildings. Just compared to the previous 2 years, they had little to no growth at all. So let's cover leasing and then we'll jump to sales. Leasing, at the end of 2023, we were at 9.7% vacancy rate across the metro, which is up from 2022. However, the good news is we're still half of the national vacancy rate, as I said earlier, around that 20% mark. We're still leading Sioux Falls, which is a comparable market too. They're at about 13%. So bad for our historical amount, but compared to other metros, still healthy. Breaking that down by class, A, B, and C, the quality of the office space, vacancy is about evenly distributed, all in that 9-10% range per class. Class A was the only positive net absorption in 2023. And we saw less space leased in 2023 as well, about a 20% reduction. However, it was up from 2021, interestingly enough. By city, Fargo leads the way for vacancy at 10.5%. That's primarily due to the higher vacancy downtown, followed by West Fargo and then Moorhead. One quick note, the values on the side, the ones I just named, those are as of the end of 2023, and then the ones on the right in the green and red, that's as of today. So we've seen slight changes since. As far as specific areas, downtown Fargo had the highest vacancy, almost 15%. The lowest vacancy, West Fargo, north of I-94, was just at 2.6%. We didn't see a lot of large or notable leases in 2023. Again, along that theme, smaller but nicer spaces. About 74% of the deals that we saw were those small office spaces, which are about 3,000 square feet or less. That's where we saw most of the demand. We also saw the subleasing trend in our market. Anecdotally, here's one, the Wex Health building, former Wex Health building in West Fargo. They subleased 30,000 square feet to the city of West Fargo. So we saw that trend as well. So that was all leasing activity. Now we'll jump to the sales side. Same story. We saw less deals. We saw a decrease in the average price per square foot. That's an interesting stat. So it was at about $181 a foot in 2022, down to about $156 in 2023. How did sales look per city? Majority of them happened in Fargo. If you compare the price per square foot, West Fargo was above average price per square foot. Fargo was about average. Moorhead was a little below. We continue to see that small office condo trend too we talked about last year. They comprised about 15 of the 41 sales. These are those smaller offices, about 3,000 square feet or less. They're typically newer and more expensive, which brings up the price per square foot, as you can see, between 250 and 470, well above that 156 average. One notable sale was the Bluegrass office building. It's a 12,000 square foot multi-tenant building, partially owner occupied. That traded for $231 a square foot. This is just north of 52nd Avenue South. Looking forward to this year, we aren't seeing a lot of new spec development in the office industry. I wonder why. One, though, is the Tillstone office retail development. So this is between the Walmart on 52nd Avenue South and the new Sanford Sports Complex. This one's 33,000 square feet. Office on the second floor, also partially owner occupied. So last year we predicted, this year, will the doom and gloom continue? Very likely to some degree. I hate to break it. But vacancy, I predict, will continue to rise. I just think that's where we're headed. I think we'll see very little purely spec office projects being built. We might see a little more of that, kind of partially owner-occupied, but purely spec, I think there'll be very little. But mixing in a little optimism, I think the Class A rates will continue to rise. I think we'll see that trend continue. And again, I think a little more optimism. I think we'll stop the bleeding of that average price per square foot. I think that will probably remain flat and not decrease as it did this year. For my wild card, I also rep the hockey market in our office. Last year I predicted the Minnesota Wild will win a playoff series. They did not. This year I'm setting the bar low. They're a bubble playoff team. They'll make the playoffs, and then they'll lose. So that concludes the office market update. So let's transition to the industrial side with Brett Saladin. Brett grew up in Chicago. He played football for John Gallardi at St. John's University. He started losing his hair at the ripe age of 23, and as you can see, he's still bald today. Please welcome to the stage Brett Saladin.
Wow. All right. Well, thanks, Paul. Thanks, fellas. I guess these bald jokes for me are going to be a reoccurring theme here at this event, so just bear with me. Also bear with me. Right after my presentation here, we're going to take a quick 5-minute break, so just hang tight. But my name is Brett Saladin, commercial agent here at Goldmark Commercial Real Estate. Prior to getting into real estate, had the opportunity to actually work in the commercial construction environment here in the Metro for a couple years. What that allowed me to do, really twofold. Number one, have experience on a commercial job site, understand the equipment, the personnel, and just understand what it takes to build or construct a building. And number two, it allowed me the opportunity to develop relationships with the developers, contractors, as well as additional trades, which really kind of serves me well in this role. So what makes up the industrial sector? What are the properties that would essentially create the sector, and what are those? Production, manufacturing facilities, distribution, warehouse buildings, transportation, logistic hubs, and then just your typical shop that may or may not come with yard space attached. But essentially, those are the properties that would make up the industrial sector. So let's get into it from a high level on a national stage, the headlines. So over the last 2 years, COVID absolutely lit the industrial market on fire, both on a national and local stage. Onshoring, nearshoring for manufacturing companies and businesses, along with the last mile delivery expansion that's been happening, has played a role in keeping the industrial market fairly steady. But as you can see on these headlines, by the end of the year, a lot of these headlines are pretty bearish. And so really the question that coming into this year is, how hot is that fire still burning? Well, the fire slowed a little bit. Now these two graphs that you're looking at, this illustrates, the top one illustrates that supply last year almost tripled. So by default, that pushed vacancy up. Additionally, the bottom graph, construction starts dropped by the end of last year. So I wanted to highlight essentially two markets in our country, Dallas and Phoenix. So Dallas and Phoenix, they've led the nation in new industrial development starts, accounting for almost 17% of all starts nationwide. But even in these hot markets, for example, Dallas, in 2022, Dallas brought 49 million square feet of new industrial space to market. And in 2023, they brought 26 million. So even at these hot markets on a national stage, things did pull back in 2023. So to continue on the national trends, the current industrial vacancy rate, 5.6%, compared to 3.7% last year, but still a healthy number even though it's on the increase. Additionally, so 447 million square feet was under construction at the end of 23, compared to 713 million square feet that was under construction at the end of 22. So that delta is 37% year over year. Then lastly, so there was a change of 39% year over year in that national industrial square footage absorption. So how does our metro industrial rent price compare nationally? So as you can see, $7.60, that was up over year since 2022. You can see LA leading the charge, $13.69 a square foot. Our metro, $8.11 price per square foot, once again up from 22, and you can see how we fare against other Midwest cities. Now, one thing to note, this is strictly just base rent. There's no CAM at play right now. For the industrial sector here in our market, we were just shy of $1.40 price per square foot. So, coming back home, our industrial universe, what you're looking at, these green dots represent all of the industrial buildings in our metro, a little over 2,300 buildings in total. And what those buildings, cumulatively, they make up just shy of 39 million square feet of industrial space. Storage units in our market, we're currently sitting at 2.65 million square feet of storage space. That number is not tied to the overall industrial space, but still something of note for our local metro. 6.2 million square feet has been added of industrial square footage since 2019. So over the last 5 years, that equates to a 19% growth. So industrial over the last 5 years, very significant growth. And when you look at our metro as far as all asset classes, industrial by far and away has led the charge. So to look at the industrial permits specifically, down just shy of 20%. Why? Well, just like Nate and Andy and some of the guys will allude to, when you look at the construction costs in 23 coupled with the interest rate environment, there just was a pullback on the permit rates. From a volume perspective, or a value, I should say, a value perspective, in 2022, the Metro, we were at $88 million of industrial value of permits, and that decreased to 70.8, 70.8. So that's that delta of almost 20%. When we look at leasing, our vacancy rate's 3.1%. So that change is only 0.2% from last year to this year. Still incredible number for our Metro. We have just shy of 1.2 million square feet of vacant space. And then last year in our Metro, there was 433,000 square feet that was leased of industrial space, up compared to 2022. Now, when we look at city by city, you'll see once again, just like Paul's slide, the numbers on the left are as of the end of the year, and then the red and green numbers are as of today, 2 months into the year. So Fargo at the end of last year, 4.1%. You can see West Fargo just shy of 1%, Moorhead at 1%. Unbelievably low supply. In regards to some noteworthy leases, last year, this property is just north of County Road 20 in Fargo, 127,500 square foot lease, single tenant lease. We also saw, our market saw a 48,400 square foot lease in this multi-tenant building. This facility is just north of 19th Avenue North here in Fargo. Now to switch gears from leasing into sales. You can see we're up to 123 transactions of commercial deals, industrial deals, compared to 108 in 2022. This is the first time that our metro industrial sector has eclipsed $100 price per square foot. So very significant for our market. The city stats. Fargo led the charge, 101 transactions, West Fargo 10, Moorhead 12, but in my opinion, $125 million of industrial sales alone in 2023. To highlight a couple of those sales, this is very similar to last year's number, but call it half of those transactions were the shop condos, 3,600 square feet or less. The question still remains, is our market saturated yet? Jury's still out. Industrial sales, 145,000 square foot building just north of 19th Avenue, sold last year for 17.86. This was an owner occupant. Also, another owner occupant deal, 66,000 square foot distribution manufacturing facility, sold for $8.3 million. Now, one thing that we try to do is look at potential spec projects. As of right now, the permit data does not show any specific large spec products coming to market. There's products that are being marketed, but no specific permits that have been pulled for those. So we wanted to highlight a smaller spec project coming to our market this summer, 3 buildings, roughly 35,000 square feet, variant for summer of this year. So, lastly, some predictions. Where are we going to go this year? Well, I believe that the available square footage for lease will decrease. The demand is still high. Due to the demand, I think asking rents will increase. And then lastly, because of that demand, there has to be supply. So I'm predicting that by the end of this year, some of those spec project permits will start to come back to life and we'll see some activity. Now, before I click for my wild card, I have to reference back to Andy, because I'm pretty sure he had something really crazy about the Detroit Lions, winning the Super Bowl? Well, that's going to be pretty hard to do because they got to get through the division and beat my Green Bay Packers, because I believe that the Packers are going to win the NFC North this year. So with all that being said, thanks for hanging tight. We will have a 5-minute break, so please get up, walk around, grab the refreshments, restroom. We'll see you back here very, very shortly. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage, Aaron Hill.
Mike, check. There we go. All right, everybody, sorry to interrupt the socializing. I promise we will have some more afterwards, and it is an open bar. I don't know if anybody has said that yet, so hang with us here. So my name is Aaron Hill. I've been with Goldmark for about a year and a half. I'm one of the co-founders of Fargo Brewing Company. I'm a Fargo Park Board Commissioner and a former basketball referee. So I have done a North Dakota State High School Championship game. So with my time at the brewery, I learned a lot of valuable, can we turn my mic down just a bit, please? Thank you. With my time at the brewery, I learned a lot of valuable things. I learned how to drive a car without using my hands. I learned how to make it look like I was drinking beer when I really wasn't drinking beer. And I perfected the Irish goodbye. And if you don't know what the Irish goodbye is, just ask these Hebron brick gentlemen in the front row, they'll tell you. But all in all, I think that equips me well to give you the retail update. So let's look at some national headlines. So last year, there was a lot of uncertainty surrounding retail. Things like death to shopping malls, rise of e-commerce, labor shortages. So while we think the labor shortages will continue, the retail sector had a very strong 2023 and looks very good heading into 24. So high-level national stats, national vacancy rates remain very healthy, down slightly from last year. So as we've seen before, one of the issues affecting this category is the limited supply, high interest rates, construction costs. Inventory has slowed down. So we'll take a look at our permits a little bit later. Second year in a row, store openings outpace closings. So the openings included things like sporting goods, apparel and accessories, and the discount stores, so Dollar Generals, Dollar Trees. Closings were largely driven by the bankruptcies of Bed Bath & Beyond, Tuesday Morning, and Rite Aid, with over 1,600 closings nationally. And of course, e-commerce. So last year in 22, it hit $1 trillion for the first time. We were at $1.1 trillion in 2023. So deeper into e-commerce, shouldn't really surprise any of us that it has grown tremendously over the past decade and really shows no sign of slowing down. But what we thought was really interesting is that it only made up 15% of the overall retail last year. So brick and mortar is still strong and still very important. So not necessarily looking at brick and mortar, but looking at consumer habits. Experiential users are still strong, that health and personal care category. So that includes fitness centers. So that led the way, apparel and accessories. Office equipment and supplies, that one kind of surprised me a little bit, and I'm kind of wondering if it isn't from that shift from traditional office into the home office setting. And of course, food and beverage, which still needs brick and mortar locations. So on to our local market. We have over 1,100 general retail and restaurant spaces in our local market. So the blue you see on the map is the general retail, the gold is the bar restaurant category. Shouldn't really surprise anybody in this room, locations along high traffic, high visibility corridors, really important for retail users. Some high level stats in the universe, we saw 14.5 million square feet of retail and restaurant space in the metro. Following the national trend, we had the second lowest growth rate of new retail square footage since 2011 at under 1%. Interesting that the office is 2011 as well. But if we look at that 5-year rate, the metro is up 6%. Specifically looking at permits, overall permits were down 9% in 2023. Fargo was down over 24%, but still strong overall compared to previous years. We did just see this year West Acres announced a new permit for Von Mauer. I believe that's $16 million, if I recall correctly. And I should mention, all of these stats that we're going through do not include West Acres. So everything we're looking at is outside of West Acres. So West Fargo was up $3.6 million versus zero in 2022. And Moorhead was up 91%, so $3.6 million in 22 and just under $7 million last year in 2023. Specifically looking at our leasing numbers, vacancy rate, very healthy, 4.8% last year compared to 5.9% in 2022. We saw a positive net absorption of 247,000 square feet. And we had over 240,000 square feet leased in 2023, a very sizable increase over the past few years. Breaking that out by the city, Fargo, still healthy. Inventory went down, but vacancy stayed steady. West Fargo had extremely low vacancy, but an increase of 70% in inventory. Also saw the highest price per square foot because of the age of the inventory, it's newer. Moorhead had the highest vacancy in the metro and the lowest price per square foot. The decrease in inventory was mostly due to the fact that the Moorhead Center Mall is no longer on the market. So looking at our highs and lows, similar to office, downtown had the highest vacancy, 13.7%. West Fargo, north of I-94, had the lowest with under 1%. We're gonna look at a couple of notable leases. I didn't know that was coming. Well played, well played. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. O'Reilly Auto Parts. Southmore Square on 8th Street South in Moorhead, 21,000 square feet. Planet Fitness moved into the former Gordman's building in Fargo, 20,000 square feet. So that's the leasing stats. We're going to look at sales now. So in the metro, we had 35 deals with an average price per square foot of $223. So while the square foot is up over 2022, the total square foot sold is down over previous years, but the price per square foot is higher. Breaking that out by city, Fargo led the way with 17 transactions, just shy of $40 million. West Fargo, only 5 transactions, under $9 million, but again, the highest price per square foot. Moorhead, 13 deals, again, lowest price per square foot. Notable sales. You didn't think we were going to get through this whole thing without talking about car washes, did you? Come on. So 5 transactions last year, all Silver Star car washes, all purchased by the same investor group based in Atlanta. Prices varied between 3.1 and 5.7 million. Look at the average price per square foot, $1,000 per square foot on these car wash transactions. So we'll keep our eye on that. Maybe it'll just be a whole category next year, just a car wash category. Another notable sale in the community, Johnny Carino's sold 7,400 square feet, $1.75 million, which will now be the K-Pot Korean barbecue. So that's a look at the past. Now we're going to look ahead into the future, make some predictions for 2024 on retail. So I think labor issues will persist, as will inflation and the high construction costs. Keep in mind that the average retail worker makes $35,000 a year, $17 an hour, and with single-digit unemployment rates, these people just kind of churn through some of these jobs. And these businesses can be open 7 days a week, 12 to 16 hours a day. And trust me from experience, if you aren't there watching things and keeping an eye on it, it can get away from you pretty quickly. But on the positive note, I think vacancy will continue to go down. I think the lease rates will continue to rise. And I think we're going to see positive absorption again in 2024. And my wild card, well, everybody's got all these sports things going on. I'm going to do a fashion trend. Mustaches will be awesome forever. I know there's a few people. Yeah, thank you, Alex. I told Alex to clap. Thank you. Mustaches are awesome. So, all right, that's my time. That's the retail update. Now I get the pleasure to introduce Mr. Patrick Vesey to give the multifamily update. Patrick has been with Goldmark Commercial for 24 years. When Patrick graduated from high school, should be in the early 1900s. His high school annual, which we call yearbooks, by the way, Patrick, said he was going to go to NDSU and sell real estate. We affectionately call him Grandpa in the office, so please be careful as you go up the stairs, Patrick. And please help me welcome Patrick Vesey. All right.
Thank you, Aaron. As Aaron stated, I started in 1999. I was thinking about that as we had this event, and I'm like, well, geez, there was still dial-up internet. We were scared of Y2K, the world was going to end. And Ken Reagan, if he's still here, he used to have brown hair at that time. I don't know if I see him back there, but I'm here to talk about multifamily. We've got some trends that are interesting and that are coming up, but some of the primary storylines nationally are multifamily remains a high demand with a low supply market. Rising costs are putting a squeeze on many projects, namely insurance. This is a hot topic with multifamily. And despite strong unit delivery in 2023, there are concerns of the national slowdown in 2024. Some of the national headlines for multifamily market include a relatively healthy vacancy number at 7.5%. Various reports put total unit delivery in 2023 between 475,000 and 550,000 units. This is consistent with the prior year. And one research report put total sales of multifamily in the U.S. at $119 billion in 2023, which is down between 60 and 70% from the previous year. So it's very clear that the interest rate environment had a huge impact on what happened last year. So our multifamily universe. There are over 2,300 multifamily buildings in the Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo metro, and this includes mixed-use developments. There are just over 56,000 units across the FM metro, and nearly 500 new units were added to the market according to the city records, compared to 1,066 permitted. Now, not all permitted units are completed and added in the permit year, so some are still under construction, will come on this year. The 5-year growth rate across the metro is at 8.4%. Fargo's leading at 11%, with West Fargo last at 4.4%. Now that we know the overall multifamily universe, let's look at some of the permit numbers. In 2023, the units were down 10% year over year after being up 4.5% in 2022. Fargo was down 15%. No units permitted in West Fargo for all of 2023. And Moorhead enjoyed a big increase. They were up 61% year over year in permitted units as well. Again, why were the permits down? The high interest rates and construction costs obviously slowed some of the projects down, and people needed to do some value engineering. Thanks to the most recent data provided by Appraisal Services, let's look at some of the most recent vacancy rates city by city. Fargo is at 7.32% currently, which is up from 2022, where it was 4.72%. Downtown is at 15.8%, up from 22, where it was 7.85%, so that's a significant increase. South Fargo up 6.8%, up from 22, where it was 4.27%. And North Fargo, 4.8%, which is down from 2022, where it was 5.8, so that's relatively healthy. West Fargo, 5.8%, up from 22, where it was 3.9, and Fargo at 6.4, remaining consistent with 2022, where it was 6.5. So let's take a look at some of the sales numbers. Here's some historical multifamily sales. Again, it's tough to compare with the record volume of 21, but it's still up above 2022. So a strong year in total units sold, and again, a record year for price per unit, reaching $96,000 a unit in 2023. This surprised me. As you see, in 2022, it was at $89,000 per unit. So values per unit highly depend on the quality of the assets sold in that given year, amenities, age, all of that matters. So here's a deeper dive into city stats and multifamily sales. Multifamily sales in 2023 consisted of a total of 1,433 units across 51 total sales. That's down from 67 total sales in 2022. Fargo with 37, with an average price per unit of $104,000. West Fargo had only one sale, which was consistent at $105,000. Moorhead had 13 with a lower value that came in at $61,000 per unit, which is age, lower amenities, things like that, just an older apartment market in Moorhead. So total sales equated to $138 million, which is up from 2022, which was at $107 million. So less sales, but more price per unit. Let's look at some noteworthy sales that happened in 2023. U32, this is up in North Fargo, sold for $28.5 million, which was was $113,000 per unit. This is an interesting sale because this sold in 2021 for $32 million. It's our understanding is a variable rate loan. Interest rates went up, things had to normalize, so they had to sell it at $28.5 million. Next is Eagle Brook Apartments. This is 150 apartment units. This sold for $17.5 million. In the South Moorhead, there was a 96 apartment unit complex, sold for $8 million, which was a 6 cap that came in at $86,500 per unit. Looking forward, here's some noteworthy multifamily developments in 2024. The Metropolitan is phase 2, located on 45th Street, just south on 45th, south of I-94. It's 160 units coming and a total published investment of $24 million. Keep in mind the published data comes from the permit data, so wink, wink, $24 million. I don't know if they'd sell it for that. Next is Origin at Tillstone, 102 units at a published investment of $17 million. This property is located south of Walmart on 52nd Avenue South. I'd like to make a few predictions for 2024. I predict that vacancy rates are going to go down. I'm predicting that permits for new multifamily units will also be down. I predict rental rates will continue to rise. And I predict that multifamily sales volume will increase. And my wild card is I think Jordan Spieth will be the winner for the Masters in 2024. That's it for multifamily. Next up will be an update on the investment market. To do that, I'd like to introduce Andrew Hansen. Andrew spent 15 years in commercial lending before joining Goldmark Commercial. Andrew is an avid golfer, and he's a big fan of Wordle and Nerdle. Help me welcome to the stage Andrew Hansen. Wordle and Nerdle, huh?
Yeah, Wordle and Nerdle. Well, thank you, Patrick. I appreciate the introduction, and I do enjoy a good Wordle and Nerdle, but really I just wanted to hear him say that out loud. Good afternoon, everybody, and like what Patrick said, I came from the banking world, and the majority of my loan portfolio was in commercial real estate. I absolutely love commercial real estate, and I will be covering the investment world. I'll start with a national overview and dovetail that into our local markets and cover some good local data. But first, let's take a look at how other competing asset classes fared in 2023. This slide reminds me of a seesaw. What once was up was now down, and what used to be down is now up. Bitcoin, way up, but highly volatile. Equities, they're up in 2023 and has rebounded from a bad 2022. Gold continues to be up, and it's the only asset class that has remained positive over the last 2 years. For oil and commodities, they're both down. Now, let's cover some noteworthy trends for the investment world. First off, in the US, investment sales volume was down 46% year over year. Additionally, at the end of 2023, multifamily rent growth was stagnant at 0.3% across the country. A couple things to note that I found interesting while doing my research on multifamily. According to Yardi, December of last year marked the 5th consecutive month of rent declines. December was the weakest rent performance since 2010, outside of the 2020 pandemic year. And on the flip side, and a more positive note, Yardi forecasts the Midwest metro markets will lead rent growth in 2024. Finally, there's a little more than $1 trillion of total commercial real estate mortgages that are set to mature in the next 2 years. I'll dive a little deeper into this one later. But first, like last year, I need to address the headwinds that investors are facing. Here are some of the major ones. Interest rates. Andy did a good job of addressing the Fed's monetary policy and the signals that they're giving, but it feels like we're in a holding pattern with rates. Investors are patiently waiting for rates to drop, but the big question is when. Inflated costs are still an issue for investors. They are feeling the pain of higher maintenance costs, skyrocketing insurance premiums, and escalating property taxes. But I'll specifically address the commercial real estate maturities. I feel like this is a big one. On this graph, you'll see the wall of maturing commercial real estate loans that we're currently experiencing. According to CreditIQ, there's roughly $1.2 trillion of commercial real estate mortgages that are set to mature in the next 2 years. $659 billion are set to mature in this year alone. These numbers include all CMBSs, insurance, bank balance sheet, agency, and debt funds. But to put this in perspective, there's a total of roughly $5.8 trillion of outstanding commercial real estate loans in existence, and the next 2 years of maturing loans equates to roughly 20% of that total. To add fuel to the fire, these mortgages will be maturing in a rising cap rate environment, which has challenged commercial real estate valuations. On this graph, you'll see the historical and forecasted cap rates for office, multifamily, industrial, and retail. If you look at the dark shaded area off to the right, this is the forecasted cap rates for 2024, 2025, and 2026. They are anticipated to increase further well into 2024 before they're forecasted to come back down in 2025 and 2026. So this got me thinking, given the rising cap rate environment and the current holding pattern we are in with interest rates, what is an investor to do who is facing a maturing loan in 2024? Well, there's a couple options that come to mind. Now, every deal is unique, every loan is unique, but on a high level, an investor could renew or extend. Depending on the asset and the performance of that asset, a renewal could be an easy conversation with your bank. An extension, however, could buy you 6 to 12 months to see what happens with rates prior to finalizing your next fixed rate period. This is where the relationship with your bank will really show its value. Option 2, reamortize. You could request proposals from other financial institutions. A new bank will look at your loan as a brand new deal and may offer you more favorable terms. Option 3, not my favorite, but this may be a necessary evil. Whether it's a debt service coverage issue or the lender is requiring an updated appraisal on the property and the value of that property has declined, that lender may ask for a principal reduction on the loan in an effort to maintain their originally expected loan-to-value position at this point in the loan's life cycle. There's also another option not listed on here. You could offload the property or sell the property, and all of us sitting over there are more than willing to help you out with that. But it's not all bad for commercial real estate investors. Take a look at this eye-opening slide. Here's the North American dry powder figures. As of November 2023, $250 billion was sitting on the sidelines ready to be deployed. This is very good to see for the commercial real estate market. Now I'll jump to some local data. Our friends at Appraisal Services have provided us with some current cap rate ranges. As you can see, Class A office and retail are now 7 caps, up 25 basis points from last year. And for Class B and Class C properties, they have experienced a 250 basis point increase and are now 9 caps to 10.5 or higher caps. Industrial, which is still the hottest product on the market, is still a 6 cap for new, fully leased, stabilized properties. Multifamily, still a 6 cap for new, stabilized properties and stretches to 7.25 or higher cap rates for older, more weathered properties. It's interesting to note here, industrial and multifamily cap rates haven't moved from last year's numbers. Perhaps this is a testament to the continued strength of those two asset classes in our market. Now let's look at 2 noteworthy investment sales. Here's the Lofts on Roberts, what I like to call is the Mezzaluna building. It's 21,000 square feet, fully leased, mixed-use building. Office on the top 3 floors, and then obviously the restaurant on the main and the basement. Sold for $3.1 million, or $149 per square foot. Traded hands at a 5.09 cap. Here's another recent sale of an industrial warehouse space built in 1999, 49,000 square feet, fully leased, single tenant. Sold for $4.77 million and roughly $98 per square foot. Traded hands at an 8.2 cap. Now it's my turn to make some predictions for 2024. With the Fed signaling that interest rates will eventually start to pull back, inflation cooling, and getting closer to that Fed's 2% target rate, I predict for 2024, cap rates will plateau. Investment sales volume will increase, and buying opportunities will be up in 2024. My wild card, I stuck to the sports theme, but I think the PGA Tour will have to finally merge with LIV Golf this year. That's it for the investment update. Now I'll turn it back over to Andy to go through Eggland.
All right, we're almost there, folks. I know I'm the one that stands between you and the open bar, so I'm going to try to make this quick, although it does, seeing some of you in this crowd, I'm a little bit scared about that open bar comment. We'll get through it. So, ag drives a huge part of our local economy. There's no question. Now, there's some of you in this room that probably have nothing to do with farmland, but we know some of you do, or care about what's happening in the farmland world. And so we're going to go into some of the headlines of what's happening nationally and then drill locally. Real quick, before I get to the headlines, my family I grew up on a family farm in South Dakota. That family farm is still going, right? My parents happened to support their farming habit. They started a real estate and auction company in the 80s. Interest rates were a lot higher then than they are now. And so having grown up in the farming community and in real estate, it's just awesome to be able to now have a little bit of my roots come into what I do every day. And we do help some people on the farmland side. And so what we're going to do today is talk a little bit national and then go specific into Cass County. The trends that I'll share, though, are really not specific. A lot of the trends will be mirrored across the counties in the area, right? And so let's just talk about the headlines real quick. We have a kind of tale of two stories. We've got rising farmland values on the increase and hitting record highs across the country. And then we have farm incomes falling off in 23. After some really good years, the farm economy, like anything, is cyclical. And so incomes were coming down while land prices were still going up. So let's look at a few of the numbers behind that. USDA said that 2023 net farm income was down about 19% to 160 billion. So on its way down after a really strong 2022. They're predicting a further 25% drop this year, is what their current predictions estimate. And that's led by a few things. You've got lower direct government payouts and higher debt costs, increased production costs, inputs continue to skyrocket, and then growing supplies of grain stocks as well. Okay, another interesting stat we found, there's about 38% of current ag producers in the US are age 65 and above. So if you look at the average male life expectancy in the US, it stands about 77 years old right now, which means in 12 years, we could lose around 40% of our ag land producers today. It's a sizable number that will be exiting this profession, whether they want to or not, which also represents a significant opportunity for those younger producers who are looking to grow their operations. On the horizon, that opportunity is coming. And then lastly, USDA pegged average price per acre in the USA at $5,500. When you read these reports, they are really worth nothing because you can't average the entire, country and say, here's what the average price is. It doesn't mean anything on a local level. So I want to get local, and let's look at what the data looks like. Again, for Cass County specifically here. Huge year, banner year in terms of price per acre, up almost 30% last year. Okay, and that follows a 20% increase the year prior. We'll get into those numbers here in a bit. Year over year, acres did go down, so a few less acres were sold, about 13% less acres compared to the previous year. And then lastly, I want to talk briefly about the Fargo-Moorhead diversion. We've mentioned that a couple times. Clearly it has an impact on the commercial market, but there's also an impact on the ag community, and I want to talk briefly about that. So this slide shows the current status of the land acquisitions that they have completed and what they have yet to come. So they're about 95% of acquisition complete. They're getting very close. 99% on the channel, which is what goes on the west and north sides of the metro, and about 86% on the southern embankment, which is just that line on the south side of Horace and into Pleasant Township. Okay, flow easements where the water is going to sit in times of flood, which would be south of that embankment. They're about 53% of the way on flow easements, so that's where they have the most work to go. And the financial aspects of this have been significant. They have spent over $436 million to date on land acquisitions and property mitigation. And their budget's about $570 million. So you do the math, they got about $135 million to go. Now, those dollars go to these landowners, and these landowners are left with the decision of, do I pay high tax and lose land, or do I go find more acres to buy? And of course, the majority are in search of more acres to buy, right? And if you put yourselves in these farming families' shoes, they're having to give up acres that directly relates to their livelihood. And they are bearing the brunt of the burden for a project that benefits a lot of you in this room in terms of expansion capability and a surety of flood control. But there are a large number of farming families bearing a significant burden. And I don't think we should lose sight of that. There's a lot of people in those positions. Okay, so let's talk quickly about the universe. We've got about 1.1 million acres total in the county. NRCS estimates about 983,000 of that are tillable. Of course, we lose some acres each year as the metro grows, and so that number doesn't go up, it's just going down. So let's start from the entire county, right? Cass County overall. Total sales up 13% last year. Price per tillable reached an all-time high. It was up 30% year over year at just over $8,100 an acre on average across the county. And acres sold. We sold less acres, but the total value was higher. So a banner year, record year for sales across the county. Now it's important to note something. Even in a small geographic area like Cass County, soils are vastly different. Oops, I'm gonna go back. Soils are vastly different from one side of the county to the other, and this is not uncommon. This picture is from the 1924 federal soil study that aimed to map every single soil type in our county and across the state and the region. And what you find on the left side, and the pinks might not show as bright for you, but on the left side of the screen is what we call drift prairie. This is lighter, sandier soils. Then you come to the shores of Lake Agassiz, which would be those oranges and light blues. And then you get on the eastern, roughly half or 2/3 into the darker blues and some pinks. This is Red River Valley soil. So Red River Valley soil doesn't cover our entire county. We have drift prairie on the western third, and we have Red River Valley soil on the eastern, roughly 2/3. And so when we look at our data, it's important to segment those townships out, and we kind of have drawn it's close, it's not perfect, but a line in the sand, so to speak, to give you an idea of what are prices doing in drift prairie dirt, where CPIs tend to run in the 60s and mid-70s. CPI is crop productivity index. That's a relative measure of the quality of the soil. It's not the end-all be-all, but it is one relative measure. And then on the eastern 2/3 Red River Valley dirt, CPIs tend to run from maybe the upper 70s to the low 90s. So a higher CPI generally means more productive land. I have and know of people who have land that can outproduce, lower CPI land can sometimes outproduce higher CPA land, but in general, that's a relative measure of quality. So let's just look at the western side in the drift prairie dirt first. Average tillable acres up, average price per tillable, up 26% year over year. So just over $7,000, that would be a record for the western third of Cass County. Transactions dipped just a bit, not a lot. And then that average CPI, we track that for every sale as well, down just marginally, so just from 72.7 to 71.6. But a banner year for the western side of the county, no question. So let's go to the east and look at Red River Valley soil. You'll notice a pretty big difference in price, right? Average price per tillable here, $8,800. Average CPI, about 86.3. It came up a little bit from last year, so a little higher CPI land. And then transactions were up significantly, about 30% more transactions for farmland in the eastern part of this county. So soil matters, right? You saw the difference on the western side of about $7,000 an acre, here on the eastern side about $8,800 an acre. That's a pretty big delta. But for both, a very strong year. So a few predictions, actually just two predictions for ag land. I think we've hit the high. I do not see land prices going up or the number of acres going up as well. So I think we have a pullback. The farm economy is going to be hurting more this year than they hurt last year, most likely. And they need a little bit of a reprieve. These prices have been climbing. I think this is the year that they do start to pull back. I don't see a waterfall. I don't see us going from 8,800 to 6,000, but I do see some pullback likely coming. So one final wild card before we get to Q&A, and as a quick reminder, you've got the Q&A table tents there. Submit your questions if you haven't already. My final wild card is that I hope that all of you are back here next year when we present Commercial Connect 2025. Our team has a tremendous amount of fun working on this together and putting together this presentation. I hope you've all found it valuable and that you decide to come back and bring a few friends to fill the few empty seats we've got here up front. So with that, I'm going to invite the team to come back up with their stools, and we're going to transition into Q&A. I know open bar is tempting to start, but we're going to give it maybe 5-10 minutes. Submit your questions. We're going to answer as many as we can, folks, but on that form, if you scan that QR code, there's a place to leave your email. If we don't get to your question today from stage, we will do our best to respond via email. And like any good Q&A, here's how it's going to work. You guys submit your questions, and we'll talk about whatever we want. So we've got, I'm going to take a look. We've got the live questions. A few have been submitted. Please submit any other things that you guys want. Oh, boy. I'll take the first softball. I think I know who this came from. It says, who will win this weekend at the Summit League tournament, NDSU or SDSU? I mean, this is easy. It's clearly the Bison, right? We are always primed for Sioux Falls. Ignore the last week of what happened with Bison men's basketball. We're primed. We always show up in Sioux Falls, and I'm looking forward to be there in person and watch those guys win it. Okay, let's take Paul. There's a question for you about your slide, the Castle Security Systems data, which was the key fob slide, if everyone remembers, tracking major metro occupancy. The question is, what do you think the office occupancy rates are in the Fargo-Moorhead metro?
That's an interesting question. So Castle does big metros throughout the country. They were listed on that slide. Unfortunately, they don't track Fargo. It's just not big enough. So unfortunately, we don't know. I mean, we don't have the data. I think anecdotally, you can drive around and talk to companies. I talked to a sizable company last week that said they're 4 days in the office, 1 day at home, for example. I think if you drive around, there's certainly some larger buildings in the metro that there's not a lot of cars out there every day. I think like Microsoft, US Bank kind of come to mind if you're driving around. So there's some of it here. It's just tough to track. Just purely speculation. I think like anything else, Fargo's a little more insulated than some of those bigger markets to the big waves. So I would assume that occupancy is higher in Fargo than those larger markets, but we just don't have the data, unfortunately.
Yep, great question, great point. We talked, of course, a lot about Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo. There's a question on thoughts about the surrounding communities, and they didn't direct it to anyone particular. Nate, from a land perspective, I don't know if you want to comment on surrounding communities and some of the growth that you expect to see in the coming years there.
It spoke to Fargo, West Fargo, and Moorhead. I worked for a developer for 8 years, and one of the first questions, I hope this isn't off topic, but one of the first questions I asked...
You can talk about anything you want.
Yeah, I'll talk about anything I want.
Yep.
One of the first questions I asked him is, why aren't you doing developments in Castleton and Dilworth? And he said, well, it costs just as much, if not more, to do developments in that area, and you sell land and sell single-family lots for less because there's not as much demand. And so I think it'll be slow. I think Castleton has a very large development that has just started right now. I do think that Horace is going to see a tremendous amount of growth, and I think if you talk to Horace and the city staff, they are expecting that as well, but they also understand that once the diversion is completed, that is going to slow down significantly, and they're preparing for that. But yeah, I think the development and the energy and the demand is still going to stay very central to the FM Metro.
Okay. Brett, I'm going to kick this one to you. With industrial vacancy as low as it is, do you see a shift to owner-led build-to-suits in lieu of speculative development? And will some of the questions cut off? I think I can get it. Where do business owners go if they want to grow? As much as I can see that question.
So what's part one?
Part one, with industrial vacancy as low as it is, do you see a shift to owner-led build-to-suits in lieu of investor speculative development?
I think with our current vacancy rates, I think anything's on the table, to be quite honest. I mean, I think it's a matter of our metro getting creative in what that looks like. And if owners have that opportunity on their specific sites, I mean, obviously they have to have the land to accommodate a build-to-suit opportunity. But if someone certainly has that opportunity, that certainly is getting pretty creative in regards to our market, how tight it is. But if they can bring that to market, absolutely.
Okay. There's another office that's always a kind of a hot button topic, so I'm going to throw this one back to you, Paul. What trends do you see influencing the office market to get companies back into their offices?
Yeah, good question again. We've just seen people are just more picky these days, I feel like. I don't know if it's the younger generation, but that's been the trend, is people want smaller spaces but nicer. They want those amenities, whether it's a nicer lounge or ping pong table or whatever. Make it a funner place to be in as opposed to just sit in a cube all day and crunch numbers. So I think just more amenities. They got to make it funner to come to the office. And we're different here than most metros, that there's not much of a commute, whether you live on the end of the metro and work on the other. So we don't have that issue where they got to attract them, coming from home, that it's such a long drive. But I think it's just more amenities.
Okay. A general question, I'll take this one real quick. It's an easy answer. Where does your sales data come from in terms of statistics on the market, and can others get access to that same information? So anyone can subscribe to a tool called North Dakota Recorders Information Network, NDRIN for short. It's $20 or $30 a month. Any recorded document in the state of North Dakota, not just Cass County, is posted there electronically. And since we're a disclosure state, any warranty deed or trustee's deed that you sign, the price of the property's on it. So we have a weekly routine where we go out, we search the previous week's transactions, we look at every deal to find the commercial transactions, and we stuff them into our own database. So we have basically real time, about 1 week prior access to any commercial piece of land that's sold. We don't use the multiple listing service for the sales side. If we did that, we'd miss about, by our own numbers, probably 75% of the transactions in our county move through, not through MLS. They go either direct buyer-seller, or an agent is on the back end of a private deal. And so MLS represents only about 25% of sales, so we don't use that. We use our own internal database for that. We've got time for maybe one or two more. Let me look here. Some of you are fooling with me here.
Take the bait.
Take the bait.
All right. Yep, I have to, because I got a good chuckle at this. Do you wish Dan Campbell would just once kick a field goal on 4th down? Too soon. Way too soon for me to reflect on that. The obvious answer would be yes. You know what? I think we've covered the main ones. There's a few others here that we'll get to in an email. There's another good one. I have to ask one more. Where is it now? I lost it. Question for Ted Lasso. How is life after retiring from coaching soccer?
Yeah. I coach second grade basketball now, so that's awesome. But there is also a question about who looks most like Freddie Mercury. I assume that's my neighbor, wherever he is. But.
All right. So here's the plan, folks. We intend to spend the rest of, as long as you guys want to stay, afternoon and evening, behind the curtain. You can go out the hallway, or we're going to open up this curtain. We really appreciate you guys coming here today. We'll answer any questions that you have. We hope you can stick around. We do have a survey that's on the back of your agenda. And so please, we want feedback. And so scan that QR code or wait for the email. We'll send an email out tomorrow to every registered attendee with a link to that survey, as well as a link to those slides, so you can download this. But we really, really appreciate it. And so before we wrap to the social hour, thank you. We can't thank you enough for coming, not just to this event, but we have business leaders, we have business owners, we have city leaders, we have people driving business results in this market, in this room. And if you all didn't do what you did, we couldn't do what we do. And so a huge thank you to you guys for what you do to drive this economy forward. We are the envy of many, many markets around this country. We should be proud of that. We should pound our chest, because Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo, this surrounding region is tough to beat. And we're so thankful that you came. We hope you enjoy the rest of your night, and please join us for a bit afterwards at our social. Thank you, guys.